with our second session. This is going to be slightly more practical in nature and still just like a very high level overview and quick snapshot of the components of the classroom. Like last week, I was just hoping if we could just take a quick second, if you could put either your state or your country in the chat. Last week was fantastic. We had over 9 states and I think over 12 countries represented. So it's just really, really cool moment for us to see the global reach of the work that's done here. So we really appreciate that. I don't think, oh yeah, so Taylor is is our latest member of our team. And so we're happy to have you on board, Taylor, because Mike and I are too busy to get it all done. And so Taylor had a quick announcement about the Zoom.
Hi, everyone. Great to see you all. So we have enabled subtitles for the meeting tonight. And so if you would like subtitles on your screen, at the bottom of your screen, you should see an option to enable live transcript. If you click on the live transcript button and then select the subtitles button, they'll pop up there. And if not, no worries. They'll also be included in the recording. So if anyone has questions, feel free to chat me and I can also help you get that set up. That is all.
All right, cool. Thanks, Taylor. All right, well, Mike, I think we're done with the announcements. And if you have any questions, as Mike is going, please go ahead and put them in the chat. Taylor and I will keep an eye out for that and either interrupt or save them to the end. And otherwise, please just keep yourself on mute and to just get the background noise to keep it to a minimum. And let's hear what Mike's got to say.
Hi, everyone. Nice to see you all. Thanks for joining. When Erin originally put this topic together, she put a list of 4 topics she thought would be good, helping me out with the organization. And structure of a classroom was the one. And I was like, man, that's a lot to talk about. And so as Erin said, I'm just going to kind of give an overview and some just general principles and things. But I am, this summer I am doing a couple of workshops, which go into these things a lot more detail. So I'm doing one on the components of a classroom where we have an in-depth look at things like seminar and materials use, math history and projects. And then another one where kind of some of the ideas I'm going to talk about today, it's really getting into a lot of the details of that. So I'm going to try to give more of an overview because I don't, just like Montessori says, to teach the details can be confusing. And so I don't want to get lost in the weeds too much, but I definitely want to talk about some general things that I've been thinking a lot about as we try to structure our classrooms. And so just one thought I was having today was for a while, I coached basketball when I was at the high school and the middle school. And it was really fun. I coached the girls team out at Grove in California. And a lot of the girls never really played much before, but they knew about basketball and they, whatever you play, if you're a coach, you have kids who come to you and then, you have to run practices. And when you run the practices, you do things like, you have to get everybody in shape. So you do some running and some exercises, and then you do drills and skills and things like that. And the kids always ask, like, well, when are we going to scrimmage? Scrimmage is when you practice and, you play the game and they're like, can't we scrimmage? And they're really excited to do that. They're really excited to play the game. But, when I have kids who come to me and like, well, first you have to learn how to dribble the ball. We have to practice that a little bit before we can actually scrimmage, or maybe a couple of rules would be helpful. Let's do that before we play. And then of course we do have some scrimmages in there as we gain those skills. And then of course we're all working towards the game. And that's kind of like, to see how we do. And when I first started coaching, it was at the Montessori school. And some people had a problem with that because they're like, well, Montessori says you shouldn't have competition. And this is competition. And so in looking at what this is just for us, what Montessori talks about with competition isn't like sports or students competing against each other, playing games and things like that. It's about this idea that if you want to be the best, the way to do that is to tear other people down. And that's what she was really against. So for example, you see this in some programs today at universities where to get into the next level, you have to be in the top 10% of your class. Well, you can either do that by studying really a lot and being really smart and becoming the top of your class, or you can sabotage other people. You can choose not to work in study groups to raise everybody else out. You can do things to lower other people. This way, you get elevated that way. And that's really what she was talking about more with competition. This unhealthy competition, where cooperation is discouraged, where helping others and doing things as a team becomes harmful to the student. So that's really what she was talking about more with competition, rather than going on and playing a game like that. And the reason I'm talking about this is going to be an analogy here. Okay, there's purpose to this, I hope, is that this is kind of like what we do in the classroom. Our teachers are often called guides in the Montessori setting, but we can also think of it like being a coach as well. And so when students come and they want to be on the basketball team, they already know like what basketball is. They've played basketball before. They've seen their friends play it. They've watched it on TV. They come in with this idea of knowing what basketball is, or and we try to get them excited about playing the games. We show them the uniforms. That's like that first period, right? Students are drawn in, and in case of basketball or a sport, they already know what it is coming in. But then then we do these skills and all this work. But if they didn't know what basketball was, if I said, hey, sign up for something, and they had no idea that there was a game at the end, and all we were doing is just like running back and forth, like who would want to do that, right? I mean, or just like stand here and dribble the ball like 100 times, or do these layup drills. And the reason why the kids buy into that as players and why they listen to the coach is because they understand what the game of basketball is about in some way, and they know this is going to help them get better at that. Now, they might not like every minute of it necessarily, but they know it's good for them, and they are asking for it. They are volunteering to be there, and they're like, "Hey, please teach me how to be better." And they have this trust between the coach and the players. And so, in our classrooms, that's real. Our job is to help guide the students to reach their own goals. So, I'm not setting the goal personally of, hey, we're going to win this game. Like, they want to win the game. They want to get better. They have their own personal goals sometimes for improvement, and we help them set that. And then, of course, in Montessori, we have the third period where students give it back, where they kind of summarize what they've done, and they can it consolidates that. And that's kind of like the game. So we'd always take the opportunity when we play the game to look back and analyze, say, well, how did we do? Did we put what we said into practice? What do we need to improve on? And we'd kind of use that as a test in a way, but not in a way of, obviously we'd lose the game or win the game. We lost a lot more games than we won. It's so exciting to win the first game. When you lose like 17 games in a row, then you finally win one. It's the most amazing feeling. But the point is that, that's what students are working for. And without that beginning point of knowing what's going on, and without having an end point of where we're trying to go to, then that middle part doesn't really have a lot of meaning. And so in our classrooms, I like to think about that structure in general when we're in the classroom. There's a problem to solve. There's something to do. There's some sort of activity. There is some work that the students come. Either the students come with these needs, or we can set the stage and present the needs of the community with the students. And then the students have this goal of, I need to get from here to here. They want to get there. And they need a guide or a coach or help along the way to get them to their goal. And that's when then the teacher comes in, and we can give a skill lesson. We can give the students constructive feedback. We can set the environment so that students get what they need so they can accomplish their own goals. The students aren't doing it for the teacher, but they're really doing it for themselves. And we develop this trust relationship with the students, where I'm never going to ask my students to do something that's not going to be helpful to them in meeting their goals. So I just kind of wanted to mention that role of the adult is so important when we think about a structure of the classroom. Okay. So I'm going to, I put a couple of just quick slides together just to kind of keep a semi coherent train of thought here today. So let me share these with you here. So I think when we have our environments, every environment's going to look different, and it should look different because we're in different places. We have anyway. I'll talk about. There's all kinds of different factors that go into the structure of the classroom. But no matter which environment that I'm in, or when I'm coaching other adults to help create or improve their environments, there's always some general principles that I think we always need to follow. And the first of these is the use of the 3-period lesson or the 3-period work cycle. And I think in mathematics, there's a tendency to do a lot of first period, which is the presentation from the teacher, and then third period at the end where you give the test. So it's first period, first period, first period, first period, first period, third period. In other words, here's a lesson, here's a lesson, here's a lesson, here's a lesson, and then take your test. The idea of the 3-period work cycle, though, is really where that second period, so the teachers will still present initially, get the students started by either, there's lots of different ways to do this, but it's basically setting the stage. I like to do it through either a real world problem that we're discussing as a community that we need to solve, or I like to do it through the idea of history and telling a story, or basing it on some sort of puzzle or work that is intriguing to the students. And we just kind of get them set up. And then after that, and that's usually very short, but then after that, there's a long period of work that the students engage in. And that's the second period. And during that time, students are doing individual research, they are exploring, they are doing activities, and they are receiving individual lessons from the teacher, from me, as they need them. So I'm prepared to teach all kinds of different lessons that the students may come across during this time. And those are going to vary depending on the needs, the age, and the skill level of the students. But that second period is really important. And then, of course, as students are working, they're working towards a goal. There's usually a presentation at the end. There is some sort of final consolidation of their work. Sometimes that involves putting it into action. So if we're doing something in the community, they're going to put that work into action in the end and present maybe to the school board or to their classmates or to a panel. Whatever that is, that's kind of the summary at the end that students are working towards. And the important part of this is that second period really needs to be there. And it's usually because it's something that, like, as an adult, I can control the first period. I can control what I teach, and that's very comfortable for me. And the third period, giving them an assessment or a test at the end, I can do that. And so the tendency is for adults, we want to be in charge. We ask questions like, well, how do we know the students are going to get what they need to? If I don't guide them, then it's going to be chaos. And in a Montessori environment, it's really about creating an environment for the students in which to work, rather than just simply giving lessons. And so that's a really hard concept, I think, for a lot of adults to maybe not to understand, but to really put into practice, because it involves trusting in the adolescent, and it involves letting go of our own egos and our own desires to show students. And part of it is just we get excited. I mean, I get excited about things. I want to show my students everything. And I need to resist that urge because it really has to be the student's work. I came across a couple of quotes. I was reading a book here, and I was reading a book. How about that? And there's a Montessori quote in here. And Montessori writes, I think this is from, let me see here. The footnote says it's from, it's quoted in another book, J. Miller. It says, education is not something which the teacher does, but it is a natural process which develops spontaneously in the human being. It is not acquired by listening to words, but in virtue of the experiences in which the child acts on his environment. The teacher's task is not to talk, but to prepare and arrange a series of motives for cultural activity in a special environment made for the child. And there is a role for instruction and for teaching within that, but the teacher's task is not to talk. That's not the main goal, but it's to arrange a series of motives and activity in the special environment for the student. So for the adolescent, that environment is their community. They have a social community of adolescents, and they have a connection to the community at large, whether it's their school or their neighborhood. And this can be really in any setting. It can be an urban setting, it can be a rural setting, it can be kind of a mix of those things. But it's really about the students finding their place in the world, because adolescents are about to go into the world. And so they're naturally it's a natural tendency of theirs to learn what this world is about. And they do that by interacting with it. And so their environment with their adolescents is kind of is like a microcosm of the larger society. And so they need to have this interaction between the two. And so our job as the adult is to prepare that environment so that students can interact safely within themselves. They have the guidance they need so that they have the right amount of structure to work within that. So no matter what, I've had a lot of different schedules, and sometimes finding this 3-period work cycle can be challenging. Ideally, you might have like a whole day to work or a whole week to work on something. But, if I only see my kids 3 days a week for an hour, then how can I get the 3-period lesson? How can I get that work cycle really involved? And so I would do that by having just weeks at a time where students come in and there are no scheduled lessons. There is a series of work to do and activities, and I am available. And if I'm giving certain lessons at certain times, I'll write it on a whiteboard in the classroom. Students walk in, they orient themselves to the day's work. But most of that is coming from the students. And it's hard to, it was a switch for me to, instead of coming in every day with a lesson plan of what I'm teaching, I don't have lesson plans. I have tons of prepared work and activities for the students, and I'm ready for things, but I don't know what I'm going to be teaching that day in particular. I know what the students are working on overall. They might be working on graphing, or they might be working on a trigonometry project, and they're looking at different aspects of things, or they're working with geometry, or they have several different things they're working on. So I'm aware of that structure. But the particulars of what they're working on in that second period, I'm not coming in with anything predetermined, but instead I'm ready to work with the students. And so there's definitely a structure there, but coming in from the outside, if you were to see it, you would just say, well, the kids are just doing a bunch of stuff. And that's wonderful, because that's what school should be a place. It should be a place where students come to work, not watch me work. And speaking of work, students should have a freedom to choose their work in some capacity. And this will vary a lot depending on the age of the students, the topic that we're in, and what do we mean by choice? What I've found over the years is that we really tried to give students a wide range of choices as far as the mathematical topics that they're working on. But overall, I found that students really don't care that much about that. In other words, if I said, and I've done this before, I said, here's all the math curriculum for the year, go work on whatever you want to. You have total choice in that. Most students will say, well, I don't even know where to begin. I'm fine with wherever. Just tell me where to start. And they kind of want to do what their friends are doing. And I'm like, but no, you can choose this or this. And they're like, no, I'm good. I'm good. Yeah, I can work with this for a while, or, if I'm excited about, or I introduce a project and we're going to work with a certain math concept, they're fine with that. But where they really want their choice is through things like, how much time do I spend with the topic? I want to work at my own pace. And so we want to give students that kind of freedom. The freedom to choose how they interact with the material. So some kids really want to do some hands-on materials. Other students like to do activities. Others want a lesson from me. They'll say, Mike, can you give me a lesson on this? That's how they want to do that. Others like to do more project work. So choosing the modality that they work best in is a big part of their freedom. Oftentimes they like the freedom to choose which project they're working on, or which aspect of the subject matter that they're involved in. So if they're working on something, like we're doing a study in astronomy and trigonometry, and we're kind of learning about that, what they do with that's really up to them. So like, hey, I'm really interested in applying this to surveying, and I want to do a movie about the history of astronomy. And somebody else says, well, I want to do, I'm interested in this aspect of it. And so kind of how they express themselves, I think, is really important as well. So there's lots of different ways students can choose freedom. Oh, and just how they work. Some kids like to work alone. Some kids want to work in a group. If you have the choice throughout the day, if you have an open enough schedule, some kids love to work in the morning. Some kids want to work in the afternoon. Some kids like to work in groups in the classroom and take some stuff home for homework. Like sometimes kids like to do their skill work at home, and other kids like to work on their project stuff at home. It just depends on, what their flow is. So offering them as much choice in that, empowering them to be in control as much as possible of their work and their destination is something we want to have in every classroom. The work has to be meaningful. And again, if we're talking about, that first period, that introductory work, the more often that we have student questions arise from the student's general needs or interests, then there's going to be natural meaning in that work. Now, students might not just come in and say, oh, I have a list of problems this year that I want to solve, but instead it's part of our community. So for example, let's say you're at a school and nearby there's a park or some lands, and they have they're protected lands, and there's a forest there. And you want to preserve the forest or do a study of this forest because they're gonna, there's protected species in it, or they want to know what different types of trees there are, or how old the forest is. There's questions that they can do about conservation. Okay, conservation of land. That's a question students are interested in for a variety of reasons. So we want to study these trees and how old they are and things like that. So now all of a sudden, now you're collecting data. You're doing measurements. We want to see how tall these trees are. And we're going to collect that data. Well, how do we tell how tall the tree is? We can't climb it. So what are we going to do? And when the kids want to collect this data for a purpose, because they want to do a presentation on why this forest should be preserved, now all of a sudden they're asking you, hey, how do I measure the height of this tree? Oh, well, great. Let's learn about similar triangles, or let's learn about right angle trigonometry. And students want that information. They're asking you for it because their work is meaningful. And that's kind of, again, like when I talked in the beginning about being a coach and you're running drills, it's like if the drills are meaningless, unless there's a context, unless there's going to be a payoff in the end. And for our adolescents, that payoff needs to be pretty immediate. It's really hard to tell a student, you might need this 5 years from now, so study really hard this week. Like that just doesn't go over. But if instead it's, I have this problem to solve today, can you teach this to me today? Then that's going to be really really powerful. And so there has to be a context for the work. I want to see my students be really engaged, where they are the ones asking the questions, where they are where I have to kick them out of the classroom to go to lunch, where I have to make sure I'm there early in the morning because kids are coming in the door to do their work, where they don't notice the distractions in the classroom because they're working. When I tell them I need to give you a lesson now and they complain because I'm interrupting their work, like that's the kind of engagement that we really want to see as much as possible. I think we need to have the curriculum or our classrooms individualized as much as we can within the context of our social organization. And by individualized, I mean both the content level and the independence levels. I think that's really important. When we talk about individualization, we often think about the skills, and some students are in different areas. And so we want to make sure students are getting the right skills at the right time. But also students are going to need different independence levels. And to me, that's so important at this age, that we have structures in place in our classroom that allow for students to we're going to have some students who just want to go do their own thing. And we have to allow that, while at the same time, there's a student who says, I can't handle all that. I need to know what I'm doing today. And I need to know what I'm doing next half hour. And I need to have due dates. And some students need a high level of organization. And the way we can reach both of those goals with individualization is by removing the adult as much as possible from running the structure of the classroom. In other words, that's what happens during that second period. So in the first period, where I'm presenting to my students, where I'm setting up the problem, where we're brainstorming about different ways that we can preserve the the land that we have near our school, or whatever the question is. That's, we're kind of doing that all together. But then when it's time for the students to do the work over the next week or month or however long it's going to be, during that time, since I am not coming in with a plan of what I'm going to accomplish that day, I have the flexibility within the classroom, and the students have the flexibility where, like, I'm not bothering my students. If a kid wants to work alone and they're fine, or they're working in a group for a long time, they can just go ahead and do that and get what they need. And we have things in the classroom set up so that the materials are on the shelves, so they know where to get activities if they need to get a lesson. They don't really need to interact with me unless they have to. That allows me then to spend the time with the students who do need more structured time, where I can give lessons individually or to small groups. And if students need me and I'm busy with another student, they have work to do. Okay, so they might have several things going on. They might have a project to do. They might also have some skill work that they're doing to help assist them with a certain concept. And they might have some other work. Maybe they're doing things for a math seminar or doing some math reading or other things. So essentially, even though it's a math classroom, it runs more like an elementary classroom in a lot of ways, where there's only one material of everything in the classroom. And if it's being occupied, then I'm going to go work on something else. So if the math material I want to use is being used, I'm going to go work on my grammar, or I'm going to go work on my history, or I'm going to do another project until that material becomes available. I think we need to do this something similar in the math environment, where if a student gets stuck on something and they need the teacher or they need a material, they have other things to do. They could say, well, I know I need a lesson on this. I'm busy with this right now. I'm going to go work on this other thing that I'm doing. And so it's all math related, but but having that kind of open structure where it's still within parameters can be very helpful for allowing this individualization. We have to have structures that allow students opportunities for deep work. It doesn't mean everything they're going to do is going to be really deep, but if everything is surface level, then they don't really get a chance to see the beauty and the depth of that hard work of really getting into something. So often in a classroom, students will just start to get into something and the teacher will say, okay, we're moving on to the next topic. Or at the end of the week, here's your test. Or we have to move on. And, it's really great when a student says, gosh, I'm really into this right now. And because of having this more open structure, I can say, you know what, forget what I had planned, or forget that project. You want to just work on this for 2 weeks? Just go ahead. There's nothing that's getting in the way. You're not missing any lessons because I'm not directing those lessons. And we want students to really do that. And they won't do that for everything. They'll still get a wide variety of activities in the classroom. But if they're really into something and they're inspired by something, they really should have the opportunity to go ahead and do that. And lastly, we need to have an environment that's fun. And fun should be the first thing. I mean, you want to have a place where kids are smiling all the time. Not all the time. That'd be like not in a creepy smiling kind of way, but like where kids come in and there's just joy in their work. Where when they get frustrated with something, then they know that they aren't angry or sad. They're just like, it's kind of like when you do a puzzle or you're doing an activity or playing a video game and you get frustrated with it, but then when you accomplish it, you're just so joyful because you did what you set out to do. It's having those struggles that then in a safe space that allow you to then have these glorious moments when you finished your work. And so that safe means really emotionally safe. So often students go into an environment where they're criticized for being wrong, where there's a lot of judgment passed on students, where they're feel like they're competing against other students, where, well, that's the smart group, I'm in the dumb group. And if I make a mistake, then I'm going to be laughed at, or I'm afraid to ask a question of the teacher. We need to break those barriers down and instead just have a place where it's fun. We're here to work. This is what we do here. We recognize everybody has different talents and abilities, and we celebrate those rather than, comparing. And just going back to the basketball analogy, there was this one young lady we had. She joined the team, and her name was Bree, and I think in the 3 years she was there, she would have scored like 2 baskets, like in 3 years. But she was the most amazing rebounder. She realized that she had this one skill where she could rebound the ball, And, when people shoot it, they miss it, that you should grab the ball. And like, she was a terror. Like, she just said, I'm good at that. And that's what I'm going to focus all my energies on. And she was amazing. Like, people from the other team were like scared of her. And like, the kids just it allowed our team to do other things better. But she's like, this is what I'm good at. And I'm okay with that. I don't have to score to be a part of this team. I know she found her gift. And it was just this really great thing. I think that's true with our kids as well. You don't have to be great at everything. You're not going to be the top at everything. So it's okay if you're not best at math, because you're a great poet. You have this knack for understanding history. Math might not be the thing that you get so excited about. Doesn't mean you can't, you won't engage in all those things, but I think it's okay to understand that. And even within math, maybe you're more of a geometry person, or more of an analytical person, or more of a logical person, and that's okay. And that's why those opportunities for deep work are really important, because if you find something that you're really good at, like Bree was, then you can just go for it, and you can feel really confident in what you're doing. And then, once you get that confidence up, then you can branch out and start to do more things. Okay. So when we look at the structure of our classroom, we do have to find a balance between individual work and group or class work. If we have a classroom that's all individualized, then we lose that social cohesion and the power of community that's so important for our adolescents. On the other hand, if we're doing everything in groups all the time, or as an entire class, then individual students don't have a chance to follow their interests, to get the kind of help that they need where they're at. And so there has to be a balance between those two things. And I really like the more open structures, because it allows individual work to happen within a group context. And that's a really nice balance there. Now, what's the percentage of that? It's going to depend on what we're working on, as far as the types of projects that we're doing. It's going to depend on the topics that we have. It's going to depend on my physical class structure, on how much we can do. But we don't want to lose sight of either of those. The same thing is true for teacher presentations and open work. We need to have both. Teacher does need to present. We do need to be giving lessons in the classroom. But we also need to have students having this time just to work, where they're not being directed by the teacher in that moment. And so, I like an environment personally where it's always open work and there's always teacher presentations happening. And that might sound counterintuitive, but if we have this, so basically I like an environment where I come into school, kids come into the classroom, they start asking me for lessons and me for work. So I'm giving a lesson to this group, and then this group, and then this group. And I'm giving lessons the entire class period and working with students the whole time. But yet everybody is choosing to come to those lessons, or choosing to work on what they're doing. So I'm not directing those presentations, but the students are working instead. And so students may get a presentation. Some students get a presentation sometimes, every day, every other day, once a week. If a student doesn't get a presentation for a while, then I might make note of that and check in on that student and see where they are, to make sure that they're getting what they need. But we don't want a traditional classroom is like all teacher presentations. And if we have all open work and no presentations, then that can get, then we might not be able to see exactly where the students are going, and really help to create a positive environment, so the students really feel like, it's like if I was a coach for a basketball team, going back to this analogy, and every practice, I just said, go ahead and scrimmage, kids. You're going to get better by running around and playing basketball. Learn by doing. And if I never gave a skill lesson to them, if I never taught them how to dribble, never gave them the rules, they might have a ton of fun, but what's going to happen when they get to the game? It's going to be awful. Okay. So, it's like, how much do we step in? How much do we step back? That's really going to depend on our situations. So whatever structure I have, I try to have certain components of the classroom in some quantity, depending on a lot of things. So one is math seminar, which is a discussion about our problem solving process. It's a very powerful tool that we use in the classroom. Math history, giving the context for of the people, the men and women throughout time who have who have made these discoveries and have shared them with us. Materials, hands-on materials in the classroom, in some proportion. Project work or applications of the work. The key lessons, that would be like, what lessons do I actually need to give the students? Because we do have to present, so I need to make sure I have some lessons. And open work time, that there has to be time in the classroom where students are not receiving lessons from the teacher, but they are actually involved in their work. And, I mean, there are schools, maybe not Montessori schools necessarily, but there are schools that do their entire curriculum through Math Seminar. There are some schools that do it all through a history approach. They do like a great book series and they do it all through history. There's some where everything is done hands-on. Everything's done, there's project-based learning where everything comes through a project. And, I feel that different students connect with different of these aspects in different ways. And so to find some sort of blend of these in our classrooms is really important for the diversity of students that we have and for meeting all the individual needs of our students. And we're a Montessori environment. So, these are things that Montessori talks about in different ways, about things like helping with the mathematical mind and understanding the ideas of human solidarity and of being a global citizen, and about these things are about development as well. So these are all things that in some proportion, I like to try to find ways to have these in the classroom. And then of course, how does it all come together? Well, it depends on what considerations do you have. Class size. You're going to do things differently if you have 3 kids in your class, or if you have 12 kids in your class, or if you have 100 kids in your school and you see them, 30 at a time. That's going to matter. What's the physical space like? Do you have a space that you can break up into small groups? Are you in one big setting? Is it tight in there? Do you share a space with somebody else? Do you move spaces? I mean, that's going to make a big difference as far as, for example, if you don't have your own dedicated math space, then what are you going to do with your math materials? How are you going to have those? I had a classroom where we had math happen in the classroom so I could have my materials out. I know there's some teachers that don't have that situation because they move. So then how's your physical space going to impact those things that we talked about earlier? Of course, the schedule and the time constraints. We have, some adults have no control over this. They're told by their schools, this is the schedule, this is what we're doing, and you have to find ways to work within that. Some people have the power to either be on a committee or work with other teachers to develop a schedule that makes sense for what's good for everybody. And other people, are the ones who make the schedule because you're the only teacher and you can do whatever you want to do. So that's great. How you want to organize things or which constraints you have is going to depend on what you do. For example, as I mentioned before, I saw my students for an hour a day, 3 days a week. That was our formal time. We also saw them in the afternoons for open time, but that was shared amongst all the teachers and all the subjects in the school. But the quote math time was 3 days a week for an hour on 3 days. Because of that, it was really difficult to do long, engaging project work, especially in that first or second period with the students. So what we found is that we got together with the science team and we tried to put our classes back to back so we could have the option of having a 2-hour-long class, so that we could say, hey, kids, you're going to do a 2-hour math class today and not have your science class. So we could go out to the park to do measuring. So if I was giving a lesson on something, we could just spend the whole 2 hours with that work. Or we could do things integrated with science and math together. So we didn't have a separate science or math class. We could just have the whole morning for those things. We kind of got rid of those time constraints. Some people have the luxury to do that. Some people aren't quite ready for that yet. So we have to work within what we have. The staffing is going to make a big difference as well. Are you the only math teacher? Are you the math teacher and the science teacher? Are you the math teacher, the science teacher, the Spanish teacher, the language teacher, and the custodian? That's probably what a lot of people are. Do you have 2 math teachers at your school? So that means, are you collaborating? Are you working together? Like that can make a huge difference in what you're able to do. When we decided to really make our classes, multi-age level, multi-skill level, as big as we could, and put 30 kids in a room, I probably couldn't have done that and served my students well if I didn't have a partner teacher in the classroom. I could do that with 14 or 15, but after it gets so large, if I don't have the right staffing, then I can't meet their needs, and it becomes I found it to become very challenging. Maybe others can do that in different settings, but that again depends on what you have. So we have to consider that. The ability, and this is both of your students and of the adults. Don't put yourself in a situation where you say, well, if somebody says to you, well, doing robotics is a great way to to have student engagement, and you don't know a thing about robotics, and you hate robotics, and you're not good at it, like that might not be the thing you want to start off with. But maybe you have a talent in gardening, and so like that's what you're going to bring to the students. The adolescents really respond to an authentic adult. And so if you bring your talents and your passions and your own abilities to the classroom and really embrace that, then the students will respond to that as well. And then you can bring in a parent who knows about robotics to do that kind of work, or a programmer, or horticulturalist, or whatever. So we need to keep that in mind. What's our content? Do we have the students for like 3 years and we can do whatever we want as long as we get them there by the end? Do we have to abide by state standards? Do we have to, what is it? Do we have to cover so much material before the students leave 8th grade? That's going to depend on what you're able to do as well. So what is it that we're trying to do when we structure a classroom? What we try to do is we try to use the general principles to guide us in implementing and balancing the components given the considerations in our particular environment. So those principles are always going to have to be there. Then we have those components that help bring out those principles, that those principles are seen through. And the balance of those things and the way that we kind of put our buffet of math together is going to depend on the constraints that we have depending in our own particular environment. And so, yeah, I can't come here with you today and just say, here's how you do it. Here's how you structure your classroom. Because it's going to be different for everyone for so many reasons. And it's not really a cop-out, but that's really, that's the way it has to be. And that's going to be better that way in the end. So how do we get there? Just a couple pieces of advice that I've gotten from other people throughout the years that I've seen. Do what we know how to do well while still trying to improve in other areas. That's a huge, embrace the positives of what you're doing right now, but then always be asking the question, never be satisfied with that. I mean, be satisfied where you feel good about your life and everything, but like always say, what can I do more? How can I bring more freedom to the students? How can I get better at learning about math history? How can I pick up another skill? Whatever that is. We should be constantly observing behaviors of the students and observing our environment. What's working well? What isn't working well? Why when I gave this project or this amount of work, why did it go so horribly wrong? Or why did this go so right? What do students really seem to be engaged in? And you can experiment with that. It's okay to try things and just see what happens. So, maybe, just do that. And I think that we add on and change to move closer to our ideal as we prepare ourselves and the environment. So, I personally don't necessarily feel comfortable with wholesale changes and saying, well, I'm going to throw everything away this year and start something brand new next year. I say, well, here's what's good is happening. I'm going to add on a little bit, and I'm going to change this one aspect here and kind of see how that goes. And when I feel good about it, then I'll make some bigger changes in the structure of the classroom. But you can't be afraid to try. But also, I know from experience that if you go over the summer and rewrite your entire curriculum and do everything, and you go to implement it and then it's not working well, you've wasted a lot of time as well. So I like to try things in small chunks, see how they work, and then expand on that with the students. And see the positive in what's happening. There's probably a lot of good that's going on in the classroom. And sometimes, we try to say, well, what's the ideal supposed to be like? How can we get every student there? And sometimes we lose sight of the positive that's really right in front of us, that growth in our students and what we see happening. So before I finish up here, I want to address a couple of questions that came up last time in the session. So, and these two are kind of related together. How do you make sure the students have met the requirements that state, provinces, universities are requiring? And how do you balance a student-led math class with the public school curriculum requirements? And so this is always the thing. And as math teachers, this is what we worry about, right? Because kids, of course, my brother was an art teacher for a very long time at the school. And I was always a little jealous of him because there was never an art test on the SATs. It's like, it's like whatever they did, and the kids were happy. It was wonderful. But for math, it's not good enough if everybody loves math. They have to get, a certain score on the test, or they have to meet state standards or whatever it is. And I just want to share a couple of thoughts about this because I don't think it has to be an either or. It's not like either what the state standards are and you get students prepared, or there's a open student-led classroom. That doesn't have to be one or the other. I think what happens though is that, as I read in that quote before from Montessori, which says, the teacher's task is not to talk, but to prepare and arrange a series of motives for cultural activity in a special environment made for the child. We need to be aware of what the state standards are. And we need to know how they relate to each other and how things fit together. And we need to know when they might occur. And so we are kind of like the puppet master behind the whole scenes, getting everything laid out, arranging everything. So the students don't even know that they've actually learned the state curriculum, but I'm very aware of what the state curriculum is. And because of the work the students are doing, they're going to naturally cover what needs to be covered. So I have a couple quick visuals here. There's nothing written in these little boxes, but imagine that each box is one of your state standards. I remember when I got to California, there were 25 Algebra 1 standards. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I have like 30 weeks and 25 standards. And how am I going to get all this in? And teachers try to, right? They try to teach everything. And so let's say you teach everything. You say, okay, here's all my standards from the state. I'm going to teach everything there is. Forget about individualization. Forget about going at your own pace. Forget about motivation. Let's just teach those lessons to the students, and I'm going to drill it into them. Let's say they get 40% retention on that. You teach 100% of the standards, they get 40% because you've gone way too fast for some students. You didn't reach different modalities for others. But you taught everything and you feel really good. So let's just say 40%. And I'm just making these numbers up. Might be a little higher, a little lower, but just to give you an idea. Because it's very counterintuitive, I think, what I'm going to share with you. So instead of that, let's say we just pick 40% of the standards. We teach a lot less, but we do it better. We do it in a way which is meaningful for the students. Students have the time to grow and really understand what those things are. And which standards do we choose? We choose the ones that are most key, the ones that are most essential, the ones that permeate all the other ideas. And you'll find that what I found with looking at that list is that some of these things, they're like, one is like solving equations, another one is understand absolute value. It's like, well, understanding absolute value, that's like, you can do that like in a day, and it's not really that important. But solving equations, that like covers like everything. So you focus on those keys. And again, I'm just picking, let's say it's 40% you feel are really important. It's probably less than that actually. But if you get, let's say students get 90% retention on that, then they're up to 36%. And you're saying, well, wait a minute, Mike, I'm doing the math here. Doing it this way gives 40%. You're saying do less and only get 36%. How's that better? Haha. Well, here's how it's better. If you pick the keys correctly and you look at state exams or what students are responsible for, those are going to be disproportionately tested on, or they're going to be disproportionately responsible for. So everything is not equally weighted in the end in their final assessments. So those key standards, let's say they make up 60% of the test. I think it's higher than that in general when you find those keys. But instead of that 40% representing a strict 40%, that represents 60% of the test. So now they're up to 54% rather than just 40% because they've focused, they're doing better on things that are larger. But wait, there's more. Since those are key standards, oh, that shouldn't say 150, that should say students might get an extra 15% on the 60% not taught. So you didn't teach those gray standards there, right? You didn't even touch those. But students know the keys, and if they see a question then on something they haven't seen before, you haven't explicitly taught it, but they're like, wait a minute, I can figure this out. And they can get that extra 15% on the rest of the test that you never even taught them, which is another 6%. So now they're at 60%. So what you've done is you've gone from 40% to 60%. You have a 50% increase on what the students can do by teaching much, much less. So by doing, not worrying about all the standards, but by finding the keys and really focusing on those, it's going to be more efficient. You're going to be able to do all the things you want to do, and you're going to see an increase in the students' scores because they've gotten the right things and they've done it better. I think that's really huge. And again, it's counterintuitive to say, well, wait a minute, I taught so much less, or the students were presented with so much less in the classroom. But if you target those right things, it's going to be much more powerful. The last thing I want to say, and to answer the question about how are students getting this if students are leading things through. So what I do is I look at the standards. I know what all my standards are. And I'm thinking, okay, if we're going to do so many projects throughout the year, we're going to have a conservation project, and we're going to do a project. Students are going to work with an ethnographic study of their neighborhood. Then we're going to do an astronomy project and whatever. I kind of know what those big topics are going to be throughout the year. I do that and I say, okay, this is the science, this is the history, this is these big things students are going to be working on in their community. What are the skills that students are going to get naturally through this project? And so I find those, I just put those in green right there, just as an example. And then once I say, okay, so these are things that even if it's totally student-led, students can't do this work without getting these topics. And I bet you those topics are going to be the keys as well. So they're getting the keys because they're doing the work. So for example, if we're doing that conservation study, and the students are trying to measure the heights of those trees, we have to do similar triangles. So we're doing ratio and proportion, which is a huge standard for younger adolescents. They're going to get it through that. And if we don't do that study, they're going to get ratio and proportion through the market research that they do, or they're going to get it through our astronomy lessons. Somehow throughout the year, they're going to have to do work with ratio and proportion if they're doing some kind of work. So I find those standards there. And then I find which standards that can be done if we naturally extend those projects. So if I said, you know what, if we're already working with right triangles, we might as well do a little bit of trigonometry, and that'll cover another standard in a very natural way. If we're solving equations, then you know what, and we're doing graphing of data, we might as well just go into quadratic equations. That's another thing that we can just expand to that's based in the natural work the students are already doing. And then we have some other things that are left. And so what I like to do is I like to take those remaining standards, and then I find other ways to create context. So that might be something like, okay, we're going to take 2 weeks right before our break, and we're going to do a study in game theory. And we're going to play games in the classroom, and students are going to make their own game, which has some probability to it, and they're going to figure out some gameplay, and they're going to write down the probabilities and do that calculation. And that's how we're going to do the probability stuff, because it didn't seem to fit into any of our project students were doing naturally. We could also do that by having a separate strand where we just kind of make sure, we're going to teach some skills along the way that we aren't getting in the context of that. So when we pick if we understand the mathematical skills well, and the students, and we're guiding students through, and they're choosing to do this, and they're doing a project-based approach, if they're doing meaningful work, they're going to have to cover a lot of those skills in a very natural way. And as the adult, then I can kind of guide the activities and the little lessons that I'm giving them, and make sure that they're getting what they need for those tests or the state standards or whatever it is by the end of the year. Anything that doesn't fit in naturally, then I can teach in maybe a little bit more traditional way, but I'm going to do it with history or with materials or as follow-up work or with, tie it to an art class. We're going to do an art project to explore the Fibonacci numbers because that didn't fit in anywhere, or whatever it's going to be. So it does get done. So that worry of, can it be done in a way where, because you're aware as the adult, you have to be aware of what's going on, but that shouldn't be the driving force. The work is the driving force, but then you can see kind of how those things are going to fit in naturally to the work. So I'm going to have to stop there. I know I talked a little longer than I wanted to, but I made those pictures today and I really wanted to share them. So I should have stopped before that, but I spent all that time and I needed to share. I'm happy to take any questions. I know there's about 5 or 10 minutes left. So that's all I wanted to present. So thanks for listening and not hanging up during the call. Maybe somebody did. I don't know. I didn't see, but it's okay. Erin, were there questions in the chat, or is anything coming in? Let me click this here.
Mostly just some comments right now.
Okay.
So we can hold tight for a second.
Sure. Great.
I'm going to put into, Taylor and I are going to put into the chat right now, if you would like a more dedicated workshop just on the components of the classroom or building your curriculum. We put those workshops over the summer so that you have time to like lean into the work. And those are very customizable workshops where, Mike, works with you and looks at all the different components of your classroom, all the factors that you talked about in this schedule right now. Okay, let's see here. Oh, there are the links if you're interested. Okay, so.
Yeah, no, and I think there's an overview. I try to give an overview, but there's a lot of detail that like the kids sometimes never see. Like of me understanding like how to organize things, how to get things together, and there's not enough time to go into those details in this call. But we're gonna talk about math seminars more. I do the components workshop. I do a whole hour on just math seminar, and I don't know if there was a I don't remember what the other topics are. Am I doing a math seminars with the Math Mondays, Aaron? I don't think so.
I don't think so, but we are going to offer a choice for the final workshop of these Math Mondays. I'm sorry, the final seminar, the final workshop. Sorry, trying to do too many things at once. And so we can either do seminar or an overview of geometry as the last Math Monday. So we can start the polling tonight. So if you care one way or the other on the fourth Math Monday, you can vote now for either seminar. You can put it in the chat and we'll start tallying either seminar, 1 hour on seminar, or 1 hour on an overview of geometry.
Or we could add another Monday. Yeah. So yeah, just really quickly, math seminar, because the question is, what is seminar? Seminar is where we students have questions that I give them throughout the week. They're kind of generally questions that you can approach in more than one way, and we discuss how students approach the questions. So it's really about having students analyze their thoughts. So they're kind of like, they can be like brain teasers. They can be traditional, like more traditional, like a story problems or whatever. But usually they're kind of non-traditional types of questions that involve some sort of math skills. And then the students will share their process. And it's really great because they have to learn how to communicate with each other, communicate their ideas. They see that there's multiple ways to solve a problem. And that really helps in that second period in the classroom so much, because if students have the ability then to ask each other questions, to explain things to each other, to kind of get over that fear of math, because when they see there's more than one right way to do something, or there's, it's okay to make mistakes as you go through that process, then it really adds a lot to the environment. So yeah, so that's kind of what it is. It's really cool. It's probably, I get a lot of feedback from teachers who do it, and they say it's one of the more powerful things that they actually add to their classrooms. And I see a couple people who are nodding their heads who have done it before. So yeah.
Yeah, and we are back at the top of the hour, and I do see a lot of folks have joined just in the last couple of minutes. Please know that even though we are concluding the workshop, the webinar, we've been recording it, and we will send this out in an email to everybody who has been on here, or we will figure out a way to get it to you. I know folks have been interested in watching these. So it looks like a lot for seminar. I want to go and compare notes on the tally with Taylor, but I think we are concluded. We've concluded for tonight, I believe.
Yep.
Next week we have the importance of materials is the subject for next week. The importance of materials. So we'd love to see you. Come on back and have a great week. Thanks for all you do. Appreciate you guys.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.
And I'm just going to repeat that if you're just joining us, we actually concluded the workshop. It's 7 p.m. Eastern time on Monday.
I know what happened. I know why everybody's
What?
late. We had daylight savings time in
Oh,
America.
daylight savings time.
That's what happened. That's why people are coming in an hour later.
Oh no, you're exactly right.
I didn't even think about
Okay.
that. We should have. Oh my gosh.
Oh my
We had
gosh.
daylight savings time here. Those who are just joining the call. So it's actually right because we set our clocks ahead an hour over the
That's
week.
right. So two days ago, we set our clocks ahead here in the US for that annoying daylight savings time. I'm sorry, friends. So if you just joined us, we've recorded this. You will get the recording. I'm sorry that you missed us live, but you've got an hour back. Got an hour back in your day, and you can watch the recording while you clean your house or something.
Hi, Erin.
Hello.
Hi, I'm Noelle from the Philippines. So next week, it's already at 7 p.m. in Eastern time, right?
Yes, it's
So
still at.
Oh, we missed it. So it's 7
Yeah.
o'clock in our time here in the Philippines.
Yes, because we just our
Oh.
clocks just. I'm so sorry. Our
right.
clocks just turned.
Okay, thank you.
Oh my
We'll
gosh.
wait for
Okay,
the
yeah, so
recording.
sorry. Yeah, sure. We'll get the recording out.
Yeah, we'll do that right away. Daylight savings time can be a spontaneous math project. Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, I saw a video that was like for children. It's like, why do people need daylight savings time? And like, that'd be great. And she was, yeah. Anyway. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, sorry if I missed you. I feel so bad, but watch the recording and then come an hour earlier next week. Okay.
Oh my goodness.
All right.
Yeah, I still feel like if you need to go, Mike, that's fine. I just feel like I want to make sure I linger. and
Yeah.
just make
No,
sure
people are
it's
still
all clear.
coming in. So.
Oh shoot. We have just concluded the workshop to everybody who has just come in. Unfortunately, I spaced on this, and because we had daylight savings time, our timing, everyone was many people obviously were off by an hour. So I should have let you guys know we moved ahead for an hour over the weekend. So we just concluded the workshop, but we have recorded it, and we will be sending out this recording to everyone. All right, everybody. Have a good night. I'm so sorry. We'll see you next Monday, though. We'll be back and watch the recording.
Bye, Erin.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I missed it. Can you please repeat it? I just joined and I couldn't see anything on the chat as well.
Yes, I'm so sorry.
Oh yeah, because if they just come in, they don't see the chat, I think.
Exactly. So we unfortunately we are just concluding the workshop. It has been recorded, so I will get the recording out. But our time here in the U.S.,
Workshop
we just
starts
moved ahead.
only right now, right? Like, has it been preponed?
We've just concluded the workshop, but we've recorded it, so we will send out the recording.
Oh, you have recorded workshop.